Alright, YouTube, once again, it's me. I don't really have a name except for my YouTube name, but it's not really a title or anything like some people have, so it's just me. I'm back again with another Star Wars video. This time I decided to jump on another bandwagon. The last one I jumped on was reviewing a Godzilla movie, if you can imagine. This one is my personal top 10 underrated Sith Lords, going from 10 to 1 being the one I think is the most underrated, of course, and give a little brief description of why I think they're underrated, why they deserve to be in the place they are, and so forth. Once again, I'm using new software, so I might be playing around with things, and things might be a little better, but still a little wonky, so please try and bear with me. Had a major computer malfunction the other day, and things were not pretty. So, I thought it was the program, but I think it probably was my stupidity. Anyway, my babbling aside, let us begin my personal top 10 underrated Sith Lords of Star Wars Legends canon. Oh boy. Alright. Number 10, Darth Caedus. Caedus, however you want to pronounce it, Jason Solo. I have my fair share of issues with the Solo children in general. They became a monster, I'd say, in and of themselves, in terms of their importance in the stories later on. I get that they're the next generation. We got that. But they became whiny teenager melodrama BS in my Star Wars. They dumped their whiny teenager angst in my Star Wars, and it did not taste good. By the time the Yuuzhan Vong thing was over, I was just... my brain was fried, okay? Now, Jason turning into Caedus made sense, and I even liked it. I liked the idea, it had merit, but boy oh boy, was it wasted. First of all, he killed Mara Jade. I did not see those two as being nearly close enough for him to even claim she was close to being his sacrifice, as apparently you need to make a sacrifice now to become a Sith Lord, even though that sounds like total bullshit to me. You don't need to go around and kill someone you care about to be a Sith Lord. There's no rule. You know what? I actually have a lot of respect for the Sith in general, because there's a lot of openness. I like the Jedi too, don't get me wrong, but they can be... the New Order is a little stupid, really. I actually find the Old Order to be a lot more interesting, a lot more developed than Luke's New Order. But in general, the Sith are a little more open, a little more interpretive, philosophical, and you don't have to take anything another Sith says as rules. That's the point. You make your own freaking rules. You are a Sith. You do not listen to others. You make your own path. You make your own rules. As long as you stick to the basic tenets: power, strength, passion, whatnot, what drives you, what gives you power. Caedus, he kills Jade, and then he goes around wearing this angsty black getup, and it's, you know, I get it's kind of mirroring the tragedy, I guess, of his, you know, grandfather, Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. You know, him having a kid, and him wanting to defend Alana, and seeing Krayt on the throne, and we've, you know, with the way Krayt's stories go, which is going to be interesting in a minute, it really doesn't make sense what his visions were, Krayt and Alana serving Krayt, especially since Alana's way dead by the time Krayt is actually an issue. And this is why I think the current canon got so sidetracked and so sidelined, is because there was this weird thing going on with Star Wars for a while where we were starting to get really deep into mysticism bullshit again. And I don't mind my mysticism in my Star Wars, that's what gives it some of its flair. But when you start going too far in that direction, people start going, alright, this feels a little like Lord of the Rings is getting dumped into my Star Wars, and I don't like it. And, you know, a Jedi princess or queen, they call her, sitting on the throne of balance? What the fuck is the throne of balance? Why Alana? I mean, it's so stupid. And then Caedus, what does he do? He basically becomes a dictator of the Federation, fights in the what did they call it? Second Galactic Civil War didn't even last half as long as the first. Didn't even do as much damage. Didn't even do half the same amount of damage. And the Corellian thing, I'm sick and tired of the Corellians, honestly. What the hell is wrong with the Corellians? You know what? The canon is over. I don't have to worry about them anymore. I doubt they're going to be any better in the new canon. But needless to say, this is about Caedus. He's underrated. I sound like I hate him, but he's underrated, and he's only a 10 because I find him to have too many plot holes and issues. He's underrated because he had potential. Honestly, it's not really like I like him that much, but he did have potential. He had potential. It was wasted. I think they could have made him a lot more darker, maybe a lot more tragic, maybe sympathetic, but he kind of went dumb evil where he's doing all this stuff because, oh, it's what a Sith would do, right? No, it's not. You're just being a D-bag for no reason, and I'm moving on. So yeah, that was number 10. These first couple probably aren't my favorites, but they do deserve mentioning that they are underrated and underutilized. Alright, so number 9. Lord Khan, Skier Khan. Obviously his name is fucking, you can say it's like, you know, Genghis Khan, Shao Kahn, whatever you want to say he got his stupid name from. Khan, again, is wasted potential. He's not totally wasted. He's not wasted like Caedus. You know, the premise of a Jedi, especially, again, a master just suddenly going evil, going all Sith on you, and then reforming the Sith into his new order. I always like it when Sith create their new orders because they have different foundations, different ideas, and, you know, the weaker Sith follow the stronger. And apparently Khan was for a while the stronger because he had a lot of followers following his stupid, admittedly stupid structure that was the Brotherhood of Darkness, because Brotherhood of the Sith was already taken by Exar Kun, and Brotherhood of Darkness sounds really evil. You know, structuring the Sith to be in the same vein as the Jedi Order and the way things work, how there's a Council of Sith Lords, and there's one kind of like Grand Master, which is like Dark Lord, I guess he would consider himself. But, you know, Bane kind of hit the nail on the head when he said, that doesn't really work. You bastardized the Sith Order to become a dark image. You might as well just create a Dark Jedi Order. I mean, it's essentially what it is. Just putting a base on Korriban, Ambria, places like that where the dark side runs strong doesn't really give you saving grace in this department. It just comes off as you trying really hard to make this massive splinter in the Empire come together under this very oddly Jedi-esque command structure, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Khan is underrated because, frankly, he did a lot. He, you know, kind of, again, I have this thing where there's progenitors. There are several Sith throughout the entire history of the Star Wars galaxy that have reformed, remade, redone everything, and they are usually the most important Sith Lords, and he's one of them, whether you think he's stupid or not, which I think he is stupid. I just think he is underrated. I do think he deserves a little more respect, recognition, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, you know, not much to say about him again. He's kind of on this list because, frankly, I need 10 people, and the, like, first 2 here, or maybe 3, are kind of like, you know, they're underrated, but at the end of the day, what do you have to say that's underrated about them, especially when there's not that much known about them? So that was number 9. Number 8, Darth Ruin, or I've already done a video of him, but I will say a couple things again. Create, you know, another Jedi Master responsible for the 4th Great Schism. He's an Umbaran, deeply entrenched in his solipsisms. Creates this new, very introverted, very strange creed that is a bastardized version of both the Jedi and Sith codes of old. Creates a new Sith Empire, a new Sith Order. Reignites a flame that has been dead for a couple hundred years since the fall of Darth Krayt's Empire. Not going to talk about it this time. Underrated because of those accomplishments. Underrated because there's barely anything. There's less known about him than probably anyone else on this list. One person comes close, but they're not up yet, and I'll say when. But still, I think there's less known. Yeah, there's definitely less known about Ruin than even him. And Ruin, cool concept. Umbaran, Sith Lord, who was once a Jedi Master, who just say, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to recreate this order that's been trying to kill this order for several thousand years. Go to hell. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be such a dick, apparently, that everyone that came over to my side is going to kill me very soon after we form this new empire. Very underrated. Barely anything known about him. I mean, it's a funny thing too, because like in one of the very first drafts of Star Wars, Darth Ruin was kind of like the big uber bad guy, like I think the Palpatine of the story. But obviously, rough drafts get changed, ideas get changed, and so they utilize his name later. And again, he's an interesting concept. Interesting. I would have liked to see more stories done of him. Very, very unlikely now with Disney. Oh God. Such a waste. But yeah, not a lot to say still. He's interesting. Like to have seen more. Not ever gonna see it. For what he is, he's interesting, but definitely deserves more. Okay. Number 7. Darth Krayt. Oh man, I have a love-hate relationship with this Sith Lord. Krayt is very much, again, kind of like Ruin, kind of like Khan, creates the one Sith Order, the rule of one. It's an interesting concept. He feels, though, kind of tacky in the sense that, he's a Tusken Raider. Well, he's a human dressed in Tusken gear. We don't know what Tuskens actually look like underneath all that. I'm still fairly sure. And, he comes from Tatooine, and he's a prodigy. He feels like Anakin 1.5. Even, like Darth Vader, he ends up in that massive suit of armor. He needs stuff to breathe. He needs all that stuff to keep him alive. Krayt ends up in the Vong armor. It's not helping him stay alive. But, I mean, you look at this guy, and he looks like an organic Darth Vader. I appreciate the effort that went into him, but it just comes off as being kind of, this is our version of Darth Vader. Underrated because the one Sith is a cool concept, although I have seen some people talk about the dangerous notion, the dangerous ideas the one Sith philosophy brings to the table, and I agree. The one Sith philosophy is very much broken. In fact, one would even go as far as to say, as however you pronounce his regent's name, Warlock, he probably had the better idea in the sense that the dreamer of this dream needed to die because Krayt was frankly destroying his own vision. Turning in the entire galaxy into a galaxy of Sith is a notion indeed, but you'd have a galaxy of nothing but murders, traitors, hatred. Maybe that appeals to you, but frankly, your galaxy is going to be no better than Vitiat's idea of the galaxy, which is going to kill itself eventually. So I think Krayt's idea was a little flawed, to say the least, but underrated in the fact that he recreated probably the most coherent empire since the defeat of the Empire at Endor. Beat back the Federation pretty hardcore. Although still his empire was pale by comparison because frankly Palpatine controlled the entire galaxy. I don't care what anyone says, that is what he did. He didn't control the unknown regions, but he controlled pretty much all known space. Even Hutt space paid fucking allegiance to him. There was no struggling against him. Krayt barely held control over a good 3/4 of the galaxy, but he was still fighting the Federation in exile, the Empire in exile under the Fel Dynasty. I'm not even going to discuss why the Fel Dynasty pisses me off, but it's there. And even the frickin' Hapens were like paying him disrespect by the end. It's like, really? the Havens, you're letting this cluster of 69 systems, or whatever the hell it is, get away with disrespecting the most powerful, in quotation, being in the galaxy at the moment. It didn't make so much sense. There's a lot of issues with Legacy, but it's not, at the end of the day, a really bad comic. And it brought forth a really interesting, really cool character who was beginning to come with a very interesting, another Sith Lord who has a inexplicable ability to heal himself with the dark side. It doesn't make sense. It's kind of broken. But for what he is, he's very interesting, underrated. More should have been done with him, but his story is kind of over, so I appreciate that his story at least is over when Disney decides to come in and screw everything up. Okay. Number 6. This was the guy who came closest to rivaling Ruin and stuff that's not known about him. It's Darth Ruin. Admittedly, I myself struggle. I mean, I know he had a Forges on Almus. He played with the Dark Staff, I think it's called. This living weapon, kind of in the same vein as Ajanta Paul's sword. It had like a life of its own. It could make you immensely powerful, but it also destroyed. Riven with the Battlelord concept of infusing these beings with the power of the Force, and that if you got mortally wounded, somehow the wound would transfer over to the Battlelord instead of you, and you'd still be able to fight on. Like somehow just all the pain would go to the Battlelord. That is a really interesting concept. I don't know where the hell Sith Lords of later on didn't say, oh, hey, maybe I should look into it. No, it's just gone. And apparently his story ends with somehow him creating a Force storm, that wormhole power Palpatine had when he was a clone, and he somehow just transferred himself into the future, ended up on Rusan right as the thought bomb went off, and he died. Maybe you can see why he's underrated, but he's also underutilized heavily. Most of his story is kind of told through third person, just kind of like a Wikipedia page. I mean, just go to Wikipedia and you know what I mean, but it's just like, this is what he did, this is who he was, we're not really going to give you a narrative, don't ask for one, this is what you get. Riven had a lot of potential, and it's, you Revan fans, his name is actually derived from misquotation of the name Revan, so. Good lord, a lot of Sith end up coming back to Revan, it's ridiculous. So, Riven, he had a lot of potential. Again, very underrated for the accomplishments he did have, and very much underutilized, underexplored, underdeveloped. So, not a lot to say besides that. So, yeah. Number 5, Darth Malak. Alright, I like Knights of the Old Republic, but I'm not a friggin' Revan fanboy. And, people who like Revan, that's fine. But sometimes people want to act like Revan is Star Wars Jesus. Ooh, he touched the light and the dark side. Plenty of people have. People just usually have a preference. He can't make up his damn mind. And you know what? He didn't even join the dark side willingly. So when you say he was redeemed, I tell you, no, he wasn't. His mind was erased. Because he didn't join willingly. The freaking Emperor said, I'm going to bend you to my will. Because the Emperor is uber broken. And decides, hey, I'm going to take a character you all really like, even you guys who kind of like him but aren't his fanboys, and I'm going to totally ruin the character in your eyes because BioWare said, fuck you. But Malak, God, Malak is underrated only because I think he was a very common, very, lowest common denominator Sith Lord, in that he is everything that is evil. Hey, I'm going to decimate an entire planet just to kill one person. You know what? They're going to get away, and I'm going to look like the biggest idiot. Even though I won't care. I won't care if people think I'm stupid. I won't care if people think I'm an asshole. I'm going to torture people. Be unreasonably rude to people who are my loyal servants. Go around acting like I'm a total badass, but at the end of the day, I'm really disappointing in terms of fighting ability and power in the Force. At the end of the day, even Goto in Knights of the Old Republic 2 says he's a brute. His tactics in war came down to brute tactics, destroying worlds, leveling places, subjugating people through total fear. He was terrible if he was like, I mean, he officially was the Emperor, but if he had maintained emperorship over over his Sith Empire, Revan's Sith Empire, and somehow won, Vitia would have had no problem taking over his pathetic empire, because frankly, Malak is he's a terrible leader. He's underrated because he has accomplishments, even if they all do boil down to him being a treacherous little snake in the grass. But what do you expect from Sith? His relationship with Revan is mostly what gives him brownie points. There's not much else to say about him other than that he's underrated because, again, potential. He was hyped, he was built up, and at the end of the day, he's kind of like a hand-me-down Vader. He doesn't have breathing problems, he just has a voice box that's nothing but a freaking audio box. I don't know what you want to call that. His jaw's gone. I don't know how he eats. Apparently he eats somehow. But, yeah. Not much to say about Malak other than I did think he was underrated. I do think he deserved a little bit better. And I'm not saying seeing him as Alec when he was actually a good guy, because that's just... those comic books really played up the tragedy of those two being evil because they were, like, seemingly good guys. But even then, Alec had these moments where he just burst a gasket and you're like, Jesus, dude, calm the fuck down. But I digress. Malak, underrated, but at the end of the day, inconsequential. Number 4 is Naga Sadow. Again, I've already made a video about him. Sadow is underrated because he did begin the Great Hyperspace War. He did begin the reemergence of Sith after 1,000 years of them being... Well, actually more like 2,000 years of them being gone. He was the reason why the snowball effect happened. Without his dumbass actions, Vitiate wouldn't have been a thing, Exar Kun would have been a thing, everything would have been a thing. Of course the movies would have still existed, but in terms of canon, none of this would have happened. If you want to go in-universe without Sadow, nothing would have happened. So, he's underrated because he was a sorcerer. He was a powerful sorcerer who apparently could create illusions that have you whacking at the air. You're not really hitting anything, you're not really attacking anything, but whoa, man, you're freaking... I'm seeing shit, and it's all Sadow, because he can project armies across the entire galaxy and fight everyone at once before utterly failing and then going, alright, well, fuck you all, I'm going home. So, Sadow, yeah, he had a lot of potential. He was very much a disappointment to me when I read the comics for the first time, because I thought the war and his prowess would be very much played up. It's not. He's kind of toned down, and for that he suffers and lacks, and is underrated because he had potential, he had accomplishments, but they really didn't amount to anything much. Alright. Number 3, Lumiya, or Shira Bricol, whatever you want to call her. It's, Lumiya since she's a Sith. Underrated in that she's been the somewhat of a bane of Luke's existence for a long time. Once his romantic interest, which is ironic because she's also a redhead with green eyes. This weird thing with Star Wars with redheads and green eyes, but I digress. Underrated because she did turn Jason to Caedus for what that is worth. Did turn down an offer by Krayt to join his little ragtag one Sith order, which goes to show brazen at least. Ambition of her own, adherence to the rule of 2, even if it was a little bit twisted. The light whip, her seeming desire to be the female version of Vader with that whole get-up. Very much underrated in her accomplishments, very much underrated in what she capable of and what she did. They didn't really go deep into how strong she was in the Force, although they, tried to say she was decent, that she was powerful, she could take on Luke hand to hand. In terms of combat, the Force, I'm not sure. But, there's that whole thing with the Nagai and the Toph way back with the Marvel comics that's interesting. Although, if you go really way back with the Marvel comics, Luke and Leia are, obviously, no one knows that they're brother and sister yet, because they're, making out and shit, so... I don't know how much you want to buy into the canon of those comic books, but Lumiya herself is an interesting concept, interesting character, Had interesting story. Romantic interest that comes back to bite you in the ass. Very much interesting in that matter. And, yeah, I think she could have gone with a little more character development, because, I mean, she's, like, gone for a long time, and poof, she's there, and she's the reason why the galaxy, once again, plunges into another little war that everyone wants to hype up as being the biggest thing, but the Yuzhong Vong really sucked the life out of the Star Wars galaxy after the long drudge that series was. No one really cared anymore after that, but, you know, Lumiya, I think, was kind of like the last gasp there, and then after that, things started to teeter off and start to go downhill. So, underrated, needed more development, but we got what we got, and what we got is decent enough. Number 2, not going to talk much about him, because you all know he's my favorite Sith Lord, and I've already talked about him in an hour-long video, is Exar Kun. Okay, quick PowerPoint notes. He's not powerful because he has an amulet, he's powerful because he's powerful. He is a master of Niman. He began a war that would devastate and psychologically devastate the Jedi and the Galactic Republic for years to come, which would make them cowards, because when the Mandalorian Crusades, Mandalorian Wars took off, because of the Great Sith War and the freaking nastiness he unleashed upon them, they were so unwilling to jump into things, plus they sensed it beyond. But it was also the mental and psychological scarring he gave the Order and the Republic with his ease of defeating them time and time again. The only reason he died or got defeated was because they trapped him on Yavin 4 and he split his own spirit from his body, and they brought the wall of light down onto the moon and burned the moon to the ground. So either way, they thought he was at least subdued. To have to go through any sort of conflict again was just incomprehensible to them. Of course, Revan came in and changed a lot of shit, and the Republic ended up having to go to war. The Jedi were the ones who kind of stayed back for the longest ass time. But again, Exar Kun is underrated because he did a lot to define not only Star Wars Extended Universe canon, but also Sith, and also just how the galaxy would progress. And I don't see a lot of people defending him. I don't see a lot of people standing up and saying, I'm an Exar Kun fan, and I agree, a lot of people don't give him his dues. There are some people, I do know that there are some people, but I just feel he deserves a lot more. But at the end of the day, he does have fans, he does have people who recognize his importance. Some people recognize his importance, just don't care about him that much, and I understand that. But, he's my favorite Sith Lord. He's very much underrated, but he's only number 2. So number 1, obviously, I have strong feelings for. Strong feelings about, not for. Definitely not for. So, my number 1 pick for underrated Sith Lords, top 10, is good old female Palpatine, I call her, Darth Traya. It's a little bit of a lie, she's not fully Palpatine female style, but good lord. Darth Traya. First of all, I was shocked as all hell when I played for that KOTOR 2 for the first time, and I found out she kind of betrays you there, but more or less kind of just wants you to defeat her so that you can defeat vestiges of your past and become her greatest student by being the wound in the Force that conquers the Force. In a sense, you conquer the Force by consuming it and not bowing to it, and being very much a being of your own choice, and not what the Force wants you to be, not what she perceives as the Force making your destiny. You are the answer to her psychological, psychotic will to see the Force die. But when you defeat her, she sees that when you defeat her, it's very much a pleasurable thing for her, because you've succeeded then, because not only did the Force not define your destiny, she didn't either, although she did help lead you down the path to you making your own choices, even though later on, again, BioWare just creates Mitra Surik to step in as the exile. I still just call the Exile the Exile. I recognize the Exile as a woman, and I probably will just say Mitra to be easy, but the Exile in the end of the day is like Revan. It's you. BioWare's version of it might be canon, honestly, because I would consider it canon, but their canon is stupid. The Old Republic anyways, but I'm not going to get into that. Darth Krayt, very much underrated because, first of all, this woman is old, and she kicked my ass I don't know how many times, formed the Triumvirate, launched the first Purge of the Jedi, which is very much a dreary, dark time in the galaxy. I mean, KOTOR 2 is a very unpleasant game to play sometimes because you just realize how dirty and downtrodden all the worlds you go to are, really. Korriban, Nar Shaddaa, I am forgetting the name of the worlds. Paragus. Paragus is a damn depressing place to begin. Telos is depressing. Oh, bugger. Where the hell else do you go? Oh, Duxon is depressing. Onderon is a little less depressing, but even then, there's like murder and civil war about to break out everywhere, and you're like, holy crap, game. Calm down. Give me a minute to think. Dantooine is the most pleasant. Actually, now that I think about it, Dantooine's the most pleasant. But even then, people are all like, oh, the Jedi left, and, good riddance that they're all gone, and I'm just sad and lonely on this little farm world. Oh yeah, and by the way, mercenaries are trying to kill us all the time. We don't get why. It's just like, holy shit, this game is depressing as all fuck. And Traya, essentially, is the kind of like the person who got it this way after Revan left after the war. And first of all, she shows plenty of time she is not to be tested because she has quite the power. She has ability and power beyond many Sith. She's a philosophical apex. She's like an apex philosophical character who always has a question, always has leading questions you think might lead to an answer. At the end of the day, you're supposed to answer your own question or answer her question, possibly with another question. She very much asks you to question a lot of things you thought about the Force, and when you think you understand she's dark side, she'll say something that you're like, oh, that's very Jedi of you. And then when you think she's maybe a little more Jedi leaning, no, she'll say something, it's very like Sith like, oh, let the poor people of Nar Shaddaa fend for themselves. You weaken them by helping them. It's like, Jesus, I didn't know you were a Sith. No shit. She twists, she bends, she's freaking scary as hell when she makes Annie her freaking lapdog. Bends Scion easily to her will, although it seemed like Nihilus for some reason. It seemed very much like she didn't want to confront with Nihilus, which is a very interesting idea. Like maybe somehow Nihilus had more power over her, and that's why she wanted you to go deal with Nihilus in the game, and she didn't necessarily go there herself. She needed Nihilus to be taken care of by you. Because Scion is a mental baggage on Scion makes him a lost puppy to her. She can easily just twist his mind back into coming under her rule. But when he had Nihilus with him, I think Nihilus gave him the power, the will, and the backbone to stand up to her. Because Nihilus seemed to be able to cut her off. If you look at the cutscene, it's Nihilus who tosses her aside, and then suddenly she can't use the Force. So obviously, someone Nihilus. That's all I know, is that somehow Nihilus was able to nullify her. With him out of the way, she really had nothing in the galaxy to stop her except for you, the Exile. And she had the galaxy by the throat. She had the Jedi by the throat. She had the Sith by the throat. And she wanted to kill the Force itself. She would have made the Yu Zhongfang very happy. She's an underrated Sith Lord for that. Very underrated for her power, her skills, her insight, her philosophy. Just everything under the sun. The game that she's in herself is very underrated. Everyone wants to give KOTOR props, and KOTOR 2 gets a lot of praise too. But just because Obsidian wasn't allowed to finish everything, people act like the game is terrible. But all the mods that come out, frankly, in the the restoration projects make that game like a million times more playable and a lot more fun. If you give it an honest go with the restoration mods, that game shines a lot better. Stories are actually finished, ideas are thought out and stuff like that, and there's a lot of good other Kreia stuff too. Treya. So, and Treya, Betrayer. I think that's what it's for. Betrayal. Yeah, betrayal, not betrayer. Betrayal. And she very much thinks of herself as the mistress of betrayal. Because she's been betrayed, she has betrayed, and she knows betrayal in and out. And she uses mind games and the Force as a weapon, even though she wants it to die. She's very much a very old-fashioned type evil character where they're subtle, they're scheming, they're conniving. You know something's wrong with them, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And frankly, when she goes back to being a Sith Lord in full on Malachor 5, she's a little disturbing. So, yeah. Darth Treya, #1 pick. And so that was my list. No one has to approve me. No one has to agree with me. You can disagree. That's your right. This is simply my opinion. State yours if you want. If you watch this video, state your opinion. Tell me what you thought of mine. Just be nice about it. I mean, there's no reason to say I'm a terrible person or anything. So yeah, and check out my other videos if you want to hear more in-depth conversations about Sith Lords and whatnot. Other than that, I thank you once again for listening and probably watching a bunch of pictures I'll put on screen, and I'll see you all with the next video, whenever that may be, which probably be soon. Alright, see ya.